So you've got a stack of ghost hunting intel there. Dusty old guidebooks, late-night forum debates, the works. Ready to dive in.
Well, it looks like you've tapped into a fascination that's been around for centuries.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, one of the books, World of Darkness, Ghost Hunters, it actually traces modern ghost hunting back to the Victorian era.
Really? Those spooky Victorian seances you see in the movies.
Exactly.
I can practically hear the organ music now. But why the Victorians?
It's like humanity's always been captivated by what lies beyond, and ghost hunting, whether with Ouija boards back then or fancy gadgets today, it's like we're trying to peek behind the curtain.
Speaking of gadgets, this book mentions something called a PPS test.
Oh, right. Imagine it like a paranormal potential meter PPS test. It considers the history of a location, like has anyone died there? Are there spooky stories attached to it? Stuff like that, along with any reported ghost sightings.
Okay, so it's about figuring out if a place is actually haunted or if someone's imagination is just running wild.
Basically. Helps investigators determine if a place is worth investigating.
Got it. So you're saying it's not enough to just throw in a proton pack and start busting ghosts?
Well, there might be a bit more to it than that.
I see. So what about the human element? You sent over this email exchange between a group calling themselves Nightcrawler Paranormal. They seem to be all about good old-fashioned research, right?
Ah, yes. Nightcrawler Paranormal. They seem to be sticking to the World of Darkness playbook pretty closely.
How so?
They have a structured approach they call ORR, Observe, Record, Report. And they really prioritize historical research, like digging up old police reports, newspaper clippings, anything to get a sense of what happened in a place and why it might be haunted.
Okay, so they're like paranormal detectives piecing together the stories behind the hauntings. I like it.
Exactly. They're really interested in what they call hidden gems.
Hidden gems, like haunted hotspots?
Not quite. They're talking about places with less paranormal traffic, so to speak, places that haven't been investigated as much.
Ah, I see. So they're looking for more of a pure, untainted haunting.
Exactly. They believe those locations offer the best chance of finding untainted evidence.
Makes sense. You wouldn't want your ghost hunting data skewed by a bunch of tourists with EMF readers, right?
Precisely.
So what kind of gear do these Nightcrawler folks use? Are we talking Ouija boards or something more high-tech?
Oh, they've got the works infrared cameras, EVP recorders, you name it.
The whole 9 yards. Nice. But it's not all about the gadgets, is it? I mean, this email exchange you sent, it's clear these Nightcrawlers, they've got personalities, dynamics, maybe even little rivalry brewing.
You picked up on that too.
Oh, yeah. You've got Jeff, the skeptic, always questioning everything. And then there's Jamila, who's definitely more open to the possibility of ghosts. It's like a paranormal reality show waiting to happen.
It certainly makes for an interesting dynamic, especially when you bring in this online forum discussion you dug up.
Oh, you mean the one with Helldiver? I was just getting to that.
Have you ever come across that username before?
Honestly, never. But they definitely sound like a character. For starters, Helldiver prefers the term wraiths to ghosts.
Interesting. What's their reasoning there?
Well, according to Helldiver, these wraiths, they're not just your friendly neighborhood spirits. They're stuck here because of unfinished business.
Unfinished business, huh? That's a common theme in ghost lore.
Right. But then it gets even weirder. Helldiver's convinced that the afterlife, or what they call the underworld, is a total mess, and it messes people up. Literally. Like their souls, their energy, everything. They're not playing around.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The idea that what awaits us on the other side could be something chaotic and disturbing.
It definitely makes you think twice about what happens after we shuffle off this mortal coil. It's giving Dante's Inferno, Afterlife Edition. But Helldiver doesn't stop there. They also talk about this barrier between our world and the underworld. Their word for, the afterlife.
Okay, so like a veil separating the living and the dead.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Helldiver says this barrier, it's thinner in places with a lot of bad history. Think battlefields, haunted houses, you get the picture.
So places where there's been a lot of suffering, a lot of negative energy.
Right, it's like the walls between worlds are kind of flimsy in these places, and echoes of the past can just bleed through.
Echoes, like literal echoes.
Well, kind of. Helldiver describes these things called echoes, which are basically wraiths that are stuck replaying the same moment over and over, like those ghostly apparitions you see in movies, reliving their final moments.
So trapped in a loop of their own demise.
Exactly. But not all wraiths are echoes, according to Helldiver. Some are more aware, even organized.
Organized, like they formed clubs, book clubs.
Not exactly book clubs, more like Wraith guilds.
Hold on, wraith guilds, like unions for the undead.
That's one way to put it. Helldiver doesn't get into their dental plan or anything, but they do suggest that these guilds have their own rule, their own hierarchy, and then you got your outlaw wraiths, the ones operating outside the system. Those are the ones Helldiver says are responsible for most hauntings.
So basically, the ghosts that go bump in the night are most likely just wraith freelancers trying to make their way in the world.
Pretty much, though Helldiver does mention a far more sinister type of wraith, the specters.
Specters, what makes them different?
Well, Helldiver describes them as beings consumed by a malevolent force, driven by the singular purpose to spread misery and suffering.
Okay, that sounds way less chill than your average wraith.
Yeah, Casper the friendly ghost?
Yeah.
These are not. Helldiver even compares them to serial killers who revel in inflicting pain.
So we're talking about wraiths so twisted by whatever happened to them that they become something truly monstrous.
That's the gist of it. And you have to wonder, if these specters are out there causing chaos, are there others trying to stop them? It's like someone took a page out of a fantasy novel, with these wraith guilds and specters running around.
It's definitely a unique take on the afterlife. But Helldiver isn't alone in trying to make sense of the paranormal. You've got all these organizations out there dedicated to investigating and understanding these phenomena.
Right, like the Arcanum. They sound like something out of a Dan Brown novel. Secret societies, ancient knowledge, are we talking Illuminati-level stuff here?
Well, they do seem to enjoy their secrecy, but from what I gather, they're more interested in the connections between the spiritual and the scientific. Like they're trying to decode the language of the afterlife.
Fascinating. And it's not just about abstract knowledge for some of them, right? The book mentions this Arcanum member, Amaya Ito. She lost her brother to a murder, and now she's diving deep into this world, searching for answers.
It's a stark reminder that for many, the pursuit of the paranormal is deeply personal, driven by loss, by a desire to connect with those they've lost.
It's heartbreaking, really. But not every ghost hunting organization is so focused on understanding. You've got groups like the Chamber of Corvey. They're shrouded in secrecy. And there are even hints that their work might have a darker side.
Their motivations are definitely more ambiguous. What's interesting is that their fascination with the paranormal supposedly started with a member having a direct encounter with a wraith.
Oh, like a close encounter of the ghostly kind. That's enough to make anyone rethink their stance on ghosts. It's a good thing we have some less intense organizations, like the Piercers of the Veil.
From what I've read, they're like the paranormal version of investigative journalists, collecting firsthand accounts of wraith encounters, trying to separate genuine experiences from hoaxes.
So they're trying to build a database of the afterlife, one spooky story at a time.
Something like that. They believe that by collecting these stories, they can start to piece together a bigger picture of what happens after we die.
It's a fascinating approach. And then you have the Wisteria prophets, who are on a whole other level. They're not just observing or recording, they're trying to communicate directly with wraiths through channeling.
The Wisteria prophets definitely take a more spiritual approach, but their methods, particularly this channeling, raise some interesting ethical questions.
Right. Like, what are the rules when you're dealing with potentially vulnerable entities from beyond the veil?
It's a valid concern, especially with their claims of being able to control specters. It's walking a fine line between communication and manipulation.
That's for sure. Speaking of questionable motives, what about this Ashuki Corporation? They sound less like ghost hunters and more like something out of an Indiana Jones film.
Yes, the Ashuki Corporation is an interesting case. They present themselves as this legitimate organization funding archaeological digs, but there are hints that they have a vested interest in ancient artifacts, specifically those connected to mummies.
Okay, now we're talking ancient curses and vengeful spirits. This is giving me serious mummy movie vibes.
Well, their insistence on keeping a secret archive at their headquarters does raise some eyebrows.
Maybe they're trying to avoid unleashing the next plague. You break it, you bought it, right. But it's not just about the organizations actively seeking out these paranormal encounters. We've also got groups like the Technocracy trying to shut the whole ghost hunting thing down. And they're not afraid to get their hands dirty.
The Technocracy represents this interesting paradox. They're seemingly terrified of the unknown, yet they employ these incredibly manipulative tactics, like discrediting witnesses and even altering memories.
It's like they're so afraid of what they might find, they'd rather just bury their heads in the sand, even if it means resorting to some morally questionable methods.
It really highlights that clash between our desire to believe and our need for certainty, even if that certainty is an illusion.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the history of ghost hunting and different types of wraiths to the organizations dedicated to investigating them. And of course, those spine-chilling case files. It's like we've peeled back the layers of a paranormal onion only to find more questions.
It's a journey of endless exploration, isn't it? And one that ultimately reflects our own humanity, our curiosity, our fears, and our desire to understand the world around us, even the parts that frighten us.
Absolutely. And as we delve deeper into these mysteries, it's a good reminder to keep an open mind, but also to approach things with a healthy dose of skepticism. The best mysteries are often those without easy answers.
Very true.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of ghost hunting. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the cases, the organizations, the questions we've raised. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep sharing your findings. You never know what you might uncover lurking in the shadows.